Specialty pharmaceutical companies think they're making life easier by offering patients access to a variety of best-in-class support services. But this collection of one-off vendors can actually make the patient journey more arduous and disconnected. That's not good for the patient experience, healthcare outcomes, or company financial results. The new trend is for companies to rethink the patient journey tech stack. Today's guest, Yishai Knobel, is co-founder and CEO of RxWare, which helps companies do exactly that. Hi, everyone. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group and host of the Health Biz Podcast, a weekly show where I interview top healthcare leaders about their lives and careers. If you enjoy this episode, please press that like button and subscribe. Yishai, welcome to the Health Biz Podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Listen, we're going to talk all about the patient journey and the tech stack and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, I want to hear a little bit about you and in particular your background, your upbringing. Start with any childhood influences that have stuck with you through your career.
Well, I think a theme in my life, or in my career, starting from 8 years in the Israeli R&D unit, is interoperability and connectivity. Because when you have a large organization, you have a large system, and you have different entities, interoperability is always a challenge. What struck me was when growing up in Israel, which is a universal healthcare system that has universal insurance, 99% coverage of EMR records that are connected, pharmacies are connected, and moving to the US and noticing the fragmentation in the US really struck me. So I became right after I moved to the US, I became head of mobile in the company called Agamatrix that invented the first smartphone glucometer. And that company works for type 1 diabetes patients who, we were the first one to invent a glucometer that actually tests into the iPhone and gives you feedback to tell you, hey, you're low, you're high, this is what you should be doing now. And that's where I got exposed for the first time to the fragmentation in the US. It occurred to me that your insurance company is completely separate from your doctor, and they can switch you to a different insulin because they have a better deal on that insulin, and that just drove me nuts. So when I started Help Around, originally the name of the company was Help Around. It was around connecting patients and getting help around wherever they are, and that's really where it all began.
Got you. Well, it's interesting to string a few things there together. I have other Israeli friends that tell me about their childhood influences, like running through the orchards and all these different things that they saw. I'm sure you have some of those. Or growing up in Jerusalem. I have another one who's like 5,000-year-old things in his backyard, but it was just a regular upbringing, is what he said. But it's interesting, when you talk about, of course, in the IDF, there's a lot of complicated systems to try to link together, and there's a lot of different pressures and things that are harder than in civilian life and more, critical in a way. But with the Israeli health system, of course, the pharmacy is connected with the doctor and the insurance company is connected with you and the doctor and all that, right? So you just take that for granted. And so I think it's an interesting juxtaposition to see solving like really, really challenging interoperability challenges in the IDF and then coming and saying, wait, we don't even have it in healthcare, in the US. So to me, that's the perspective, that's interesting.
And I think, when you come at it from mission critical systems and you realize what's going to happen if an Air Force does not get a signal from a field unit and they're going to bomb their own forces.
Right.
That's called mission critical systems, right? Now, what's going to happen if a script doesn't get to the right pharmacy? Completely different question, but the solution is called interoperability, and it's called how you put that connectivity to serve the right content. And even though it doesn't seem to, okay, so the script gets lost. Well, guess what? Many scripts get lost, and a lot of patients are not getting their medications. So, we should be worried about that just as much.
So you started the company, as you said, it was a Help Around, changed to RxWare. Talk a little bit about, how things got started and what the evolution was, because you obviously had this main insight. You saw how it could be applied in the U.S. healthcare system, but in any company, it doesn't just be, okay, we have this problem, we solved it, and now, gee, that's exactly what we expected. How did it evolve?
Yeah, so we started Help Around as a diabetes support network under the notion that mobile phones just became much more common. And people with diabetes, what we noticed again and again, were getting stuck without supplies. They were not able to afford them. They forgot them at home. They dropped their the insurance. They got the insurance switched, and people get stuck all the time. So we started to help around with the idea. Hey, what if wherever we are, we can find a helper, someone who can assist me whatever I have. And we really took off in terms of the number of patients. We had more than 100,000 people with type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is not that common of a
Yeah.
condition, of people who were really helping each other, trading. Turns out that there's a lot of imbalance, but we couldn't monetize. We weren't able to tie it to a business case that really made sense for to build this as a company. So, but we did notice one thing. One of our communities, patient communities, that were there to support each other, they were actually helping each other to get on therapy. They were actually getting on home dialysis, and it was very often their caregivers who were getting their patients from going to dialysis in the clinic, helping them go back to the house and do dialysis while they're sleeping, which was game changing. Company called Next Stage. We're like, wait a second, this is interesting. So this kind of support that we can provide can actually drive a business case in getting patients on the therapy that was prescribed to them that is very complex and overwhelming. That's where we said, you know what, there's maybe something here, and we doubled down on specialty because that's where the drugs are expensive, the drugs are complex, it's difficult to get on therapy, and when you look at the business case and you look at the business challenge there, you see that 30 to 60% of specialty prescriptions are abandoned.
Yeah.
30 to 60%. That is a mind blowing number. Okay. And of course, it's associated with cost, it's associated with complexity, it's associated with a lot of with fragmentation. But that's where we really found our footing. And we said, you know what, we're going to focus this. And the rebranding to RxWare came on the heels of, oh, we're going to be not so much anymore a consumer facing help around company. We're going to focus on what we do, which is infrastructure for specialty pharmaceuticals to connect the patient journey.
When you talk about your abandonment rate for these prescriptions, it is fairly profound. And maybe I'll think about it in a slightly different way, which is it is so, it takes so many years and hundreds of millions or even $1 billion in order to get the drug developed. And many don't make it, right? So if you get all the way to having the drug developed, it means that it works, that it's safe, and it's for somebody, if it's a specialty medication, typically a very serious condition. Then you've got somebody who actually found their way to a physician who could actually diagnose the patient, do the right test, prescribe the medication. So you have those things happened, and that it's still only about 50% chance that the patient is actually going to get the benefit from it, even after all of that. And so that is a big enough problem, I think. That's as big of a problem as the Air Force bombing the wrong formation. So
Well,
at
I
least
mean,
if we look at across the whole U.S.
and
So
especially, just
yeah,
imagine what could happen in a world where that would be a no-brainer. Oh, the doctor prescribes the drug, done. They get it. That's
yeah,
how we should be.
yeah. And I think people who aren't close to the space have trouble understanding what that means. So I remember once I was telling a more technology oriented person that this is true with specialty drugs, including cancer drugs. They didn't believe that people actually, you get prescribed a cancer drug and you don't pick it up or you stop taking it. But in fact, yes, it's true.
That's right. And cancer is has its own dynamic. Oncology drugs, but in general, there's a very fragmented system between the prescriber, the pharmacy, the treatment center, if it's an infusion. These are all different entities that all take care of the patient. And those are very often disconnected or very
Yeah,
manual. These are organizations that, they're not necessarily tech savvy. And then comes the drug manufacturer, who is the business beneficiary of getting these patients on therapy because that they spend the money developing the drug and putting it out there and actually detailing the doctors, and the doctor did prescribe the drug, and the drug company looks at this disconnect where patients get lost on the way and says, hey, I want to help. So they put together they invest $25 billion a year on
Yeah,
these patient support programs, but there's this regulatory barrier in the middle that says, pharma, you cannot help this patient until the patient reaches out to you. And
got it.
that is a huge barrier that could unlock, if that barrier is removed or overcome, it could unlock massive resources that the drug manufacturer is putting out there. Uh, by the way, these resources are also quite complex to navigate. So you want to get it. It's not enough to just like, hey, say, hey, reach out to the, to the drug manufacturer or the hub services and everything will be golden. No. But today they are extremely underutilized, all these pharma patient services. And that's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity.
So one of the things I liked, when I was reviewing the companies, you'd put out some predictions at the beginning of the year, and a lot of people put out predictions that say there's going to be a recession or some general thing. Your predictions are fairly specific and to this industry, and where there's a lot of people that really care about this and have some understanding. So before I go into those, I have to ask you to explain a term or two. So your first prediction had to do with that there's going to be insourcing of the patient journey tech stack. Now, I think a lot of people know about what a patient journey is, more or less, and some people also know what a tech stack is. But what is a patient journey tech stack, and who cares if it's insourced or outsourced?
So imagine again the drug manufacturer putting together this support program, copay cards, hub support, patient assistance, and they outsource to different vendors. So if it wasn't challenging enough for the patient to figure out how to get to these pharma resources, now they also need to now they're also interacting with different vendors on behalf of the drug manufacturer. Okay, and then when a drug manufacturer is coming and saying, you know what, I don't really like the way that this vendor works, that vendor works, and I want to switch them out, that's a huge undertaking. So the trend that we started seeing in the beginning of the year and is only picking up is drug manufacturers saying, you know what, we're gonna own our own destiny. We're gonna insource, we're gonna bring in all our services. And for example, our hub is we're not going to outsource it anymore. We're going to run it internally. We're going to build our own Salesforce for our own CRM around patients. We're going to develop our own messaging or texting capabilities, and we're going to own that so that we can switch vendors, but these vendors are not necessarily going to bring their tech with them, but we're going to own our tech. And and I think we're seeing all the big ones are either doing it or on their way to doing it. And that's a prediction that, frankly, in hindsight, 8 months back, yes, it's happening.
Yeah, good. Now, what about this one about manufacturers will uninstall patient support apps? Is that a related topic? I mean, why are they going to uninstall the support apps so they put all the effort to get them installed?
So in 2015, starting 2015, there was this gold rush towards apps.
Yeah,
15, 16, 17, 18, and then something happened. Something happened. It Our phones have become so central to everything we do that, and the plethora of apps that are out there has become unmanageable. People starting curating and throttling the number of apps that they're willing to engage with. So today, when you go to a restaurant and you want to pay, you are rarely asked to download an app. And
yeah.
actually, the specific stat is that 78% of consumers, when they are asked to download an app on the way to a transaction, they stop the transaction. I'm not going to buy that dress anymore. If you're going to force me to download an app, Macy's, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna check. I'm not gonna buy this thing online if I have to download an app first. No, check out, click, click, click. And by the way, you see Apple and you see Google, both of them building into the operating system, into Android and iPhone, more and more capabilities that allow you to not even think about downloading an app. So what we saw is, and my prediction is that they're going to uninstall apps, meaning they're going to stop investing in building
Yeah.
more apps because consumers don't want apps. And the relationship between the patient and the drug manufacturer is not, they already have an app with their provider. They already have MyChart from Epic. They already have the CVS app from their pharmacy or from their Safeway app or from Walgreens. They don't have the same type of relationship with the drug manufacturer. And the earlier drug manufacturers understand that, they're going to kind of move on with the program and provide experiences that don't require to download anything. And we think about this framework as the level of usability that is appropriate for 2023. It's frictionless. I have no time. I have no patience. Get me what I need and get out of my face.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about that gold rush of 2015 to 2018 or so, I think what happened is the pharma companies had the realization then, hey, we're pretty disconnected from the patient. Here's a way to actually be, with them on their phone. And then there was a lot of good or decent app developers or excellent salespeople also who managed to sell all these apps. And if you looked at the cost per download, never mind per use, it was pretty high.
That's
So
right.
that's good. But in some ways, you benefit from the lessons that have been learned. People did this and they found out, okay, you had all this great functionality. Some people downloaded it, but that's really not going to get you there. So you take a different path.
And we relate to to this this experience today as the age of, how do we call it, the age of consumer attention
Yeah.
squeeze, the
Yeah.
consumer attention squeeze, where it used to be, we're sitting in the office, we have an orderly 9 to 5, we go to an office, we go home, and now all that has blended together, and we drive while we're on a phone call, while we're having coffee, and the kids are in the back.
Yeah.
And COVID only exacerbated that.
Yeah.
So that attention, you trying to fit into a very, very narrow window of attention, and you better get what you want exactly the right time, be relevant, be contextual, catch them at the right time, ideally when they just left the doctor, let them do what they want, give them an SMS that is very kind of click, 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 and done. Get out of their face,
Yeah.
because otherwise you lost them.
So I think this has to do maybe with your prediction about the patient journeys focusing on what you called moments of value creation. Is that
That's right.
what you're discussing there?
That's right. So there are
Yeah.
very specific moments when you can really connect with the patient, and after that, you're out. So there's the parking lot moment, meaning the patient just left the prescriber's office and they went to the car. And they're still in the parking lot of the hospital, the clinic, and they're with all the paperwork, and they're trying to figure out what to do now. Do I call a pharmacy? Do I, what, like, do I use a copay? What do I do right now with all the papers that I have
Yeah.
here? That's the moment you have. You catch them when they just left the doctor, you have their attention. In 5 minutes, they're going to be driving away and you lost them. Okay? Or when they are talking to the pharmacy, right? That's exactly the moment. Why did Google, the original Google, take off? Because they were serving you content exactly when you were looking for it. Now, we don't have that privilege. We don't know when a patient is saying, how can I save money? Well, some companies know that. GoodRx, that's their model,
Yeah.
right? The patient goes to GoodRx looking for a coupon. They're like, oh, gotcha. Here's a great moment. So pharma has already started, but not enough, actually. Thinking about, how do I catch the patient exactly when it's the most relevant moment for them? And that's when you can create value.
Now, one of the ways that you were, I think, predicting that pharma might try to do that is through more use of AI. And in particular, there's this idea that, hey, the hub agents may only work certain hours and may be on hold or whatever. How have AI, that's always there. But you say AI is not going to replace hub agents. Why is that?
Not anytime soon. Not anytime soon. I think, drug manufacturers are, um, all the interactions between agents, between any representative of the pharma company and the patient, have to be incredibly, incredibly structured for legal reasons, for compliance issues. And when you are trying to structure an exchange and you're trying to replace, an agent with AI, it needs to be incredibly structured and incredibly limited, back and forth. So if you introduce an AI and that model starts learning more and more, you still need to stay within the realms of the script. So I think there is an opportunity there, and we are pushing the envelope on AI-driven access navigation. So based on patterns that we've seen of patients getting coverage or not getting coverage, can you learn and make recommendations for the patient? Hey, you really want to try copay as opposed to government, but we're still automating it. We're still at the stage, our industry is still at the stage of automating these interactions on a very basic level before we can introduce a learning model on top of it. So the answer is maybe, but not yet.
So on that prediction, could say people would say, aha, the solution is AI, replace hub agents. And you say, why that's not going to happen. So that was something people thought that might happen. And you said, no. The next one you had was one I hadn't even occurred to me. And you're saying it's not going to happen. And that one was about digital therapeutics and patient support technologies will not intermingle yet. What would be the logic for those two things to intermingle in the first place? Because like I said, it had not really occurred to me.
So imagine that you're going to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes digital therapeutics. They say, "Here, I'm going to prescribe an app for you, and that app is going to coach you through controlling your diabetes. The app is going to coach you through managing your blood pressure. It's going to coach you through something therapeutic." And I mean, that's a vision of digital therapeutics, right? Now think that you would also combine into that workflow a copay card. Oh, if you use it, you can buy down the cost of the app, and that's going to be built into the same workflow. That gets very tricky. Why? Because the first is clinical. It's a clinical workflow. It had to go through all kind of tests. It had to go to demonstrate clinical efficacy, and then it was prescribed by a doctor. And the copay card is a promotional piece. That's considered marketing. And the doctor and this is the FDA is actually very clear about that. You cannot mix clinical and marketing content. You cannot weave those two. So it's very tempting to say, "Oh, I have my phone. My phone can do both the clinical work and the affordability work." Yes, but they need to be separate, completely separate. They cannot be interwoven. Because then imagine you're taking a pill and the pill also has a discount. You can't do that.
Yeah. Maybe you could have something. I know they've had these pills in the past. There's some couple companies that didn't do too well where you swallow it and it like sends out radio signals and all that for adherence. Maybe you could send out like promotional messages as it dissolves the next time. So that'll be for next year's predictions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, buy the next medication.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. All right. So I think I've given you enough on the predictions, but I appreciated them, and you only have a few months to get ready for the next one, so I won't ask you to preview any of those just yet. But I will ask you a final question, and that is about any books that you've read lately, anything that you would recommend to our listeners, or in the spirit of your predictions about what not to do, any books you would recommend not reading.
I will not. I will go off record for that.
Okay.
I will go. There's a book that I'm reading right now that I think anyone in the pharmaceutical industry would enjoy or appreciate. It's called the Empire of Pain, and it's about the Sackler family and how they really introduced pharmaceutical marketing to doctors and how that went out of control with the opioid crisis. So I think it kind of helps us all bring perspective to our work and to how things can go out of hand. I think a great book that I use every day, the practices I use every day is Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And I use that for negotiation and that until my 7-year-old, of course, does negotiating with me. And then I give up and I close the book and I go back to basics. But I'm just kidding. I think it's a great book with a lot of practices about what he calls tactical empathy that can be used all the time, and how empathy to the other person actually can help you do better and create more value.
No, that sounds good. A lot of the CEOs I interview are at a stage where they're, reading these advanced books, advancing their career and doing all sorts of things, but they're really sort of anchored by, kids around that age at home. So I do get those sort of bifurcated recommendations. I haven't heard one that has bridged the two just yet. I heard Good Night. I heard Good Night Moon the other day. That was somebody a little bit younger, but yeah, that's more for a 3-year-old, but you may be beyond that. Well, Yishai Knobel, co-founder and CEO of RxWare, thank you so much for joining me today on the Health Biz Podcast.
Thank you, David.
You've been listening to the Health Biz Podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare, business, and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.